Hello and welcome to Inside Sports. I'm your host, Todd Blackstock. We have a fun show for you today as three-time world boxing champion Devon Alexander is in the house. Plus, Hall of Fame broadcaster Ron Jacober will join us to discuss his career and latest book. So stay with us for this and much more coming up next on Inside Sports. Welcome to the show. In our first segment today, we have three-time world boxing champion from St. Louis, who in his prime signed with legendary boxing promoter Don King. Devon Alexander, welcome to Inside Sports.
Thank you for having me, Todd. How's it going?
Oh, it's going good. You know, St. Louis has a really rich history of boxing. You know, we go back to Sonny Liston back in the day, and then you had the Spinks brothers winning the gold in the Olympics back in the 1970s. And then the next generation after that, we had Corey Spinks and the Alexander brothers, and boxing was really a big deal in St. Louis back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, you know, and through your guys' generation. And you were a big part of it starting out at a pretty young age.
Absolutely, absolutely. Started boxing when I was 8 years old.
8 years old?
No,
What?
7, I'm sorry.
7?
7 years old. Couldn't compete, though, until I was 8 years old.
Really?
Yes.
So what kind of equipment they put you in back then?
There was some heavy gloves. I would tell you, I couldn't even barely pick my hand up. By the third round, my arms are heavy. But I got used to them. But the equipment barely could fit at that age. But I was ready. I lost my first fight, too, though.
Did you?
I definitely lost my first fight. But you know what? That's the reason why I'm sitting in this seat right now to the day. I will tell you, I lost my first fight because I took the guy for granted. I thought he was some little scrawny little kid that I could just bully through. And I was just hyped up. Before my fight, I told my coach, I'm finna just run through him. Actually getting there and fight was totally different feeling. And he outworked me. I got tired. I went out too strong and too fast. And I didn't pace myself. So I ended up losing.
Okay.
I was crying. I was just destroyed. But it taught me a very good lesson. Never to take nobody for granted, ever.
Ever, don't. You know, I tell you, I guess last year, Leon and Michael Spinks went into the St. Louis Hall of Fame, you know, on Delmar Avenue in U City. Corey Spinks was there. That was a really neat thing. And it reminded me of the days when they had all the boxing leagues and things. And when you were growing up, you were in a pretty big family, and you had a pretty stud brother, Vaughn Alexander,
Absolutely.
who was a really good boxer too. And at what point, you know, did you want to get involved in boxing? And you know, and tell us about that year in St. Louis, because you know it's a tough little city sometimes, and I know you've seen a lot of things growing up. And what made you want to get in boxing?
So, first, I didn't start boxing because I wanted to box. So my coach was a police officer at my elementary school, Clay Elementary, and
Kevin Cunningham?
Kevin Cunningham. He brought some flyers to school. Said, hey, you want to try out? Come on to the police station after school. So I took it home to my mom. I begged my mom for 2 weeks to let me go, but my mom, she really kept a close eye on her kids. It was 13 of us, 8 brothers, 5 boys. 8 sisters, 5 boys, including me. And it was a big family. So she kept a close eye on it because she knew the dangers of the neighborhood I grew up in, which was North St. Louis. I witnessed drive-bys. I witnessed crackheads going down the street just smoking crack. I witnessed dead bodies, you know, walking down the street. You can see a white sheet over, you know, somebody that just got killed. Witnessing things that a kid shouldn't see. So my mom knew the dangers of what was around. So she wouldn't not let me go. She let my 2 older brothers go first. And then I begged her for 2 weeks. She finally let me go. And the first day of boxing became the rest of my life, to be honest, because I loved it.
You know, it seems like Kevin Cunningham was a police officer. Then there was another guy, Dan Kerner, alderman. He was an alderman, but before that, he was a policeman in South St. Louis for a long time. And he used to talk about you. We'd say, "Oh, Corey Spinks is really good." He's like, "These Alexander brothers are something else." And Dan and I had the opportunity to broadcast Missouri Black Expo one year, and Guns N' Hoses a couple of times as well. And he was really in your corner.
Yes.
And he saw something in you. It seems like some of these police officers, they see kids on the street that have potential, and they know that there's a way to do things to get them some exposure and things. You know, what are your thoughts with the policemen trying to get people involved with boxing too?
Oh, it's an amazing thing because there's a stigma, you know, as police being the victim. I mean, but being a bad guy. But in my experience, Kevin was an awesome guy. I'm glad he started his gym. I wouldn't be sitting here today if Kevin didn't start that gym. Who knows where I would be in life, because he taught me dedication, hard work, and consistency. And I became world champion. So that gym and that police officer that took the time to say, "Hey, you can go a different way," I'm appreciative for that.
Now you have 3 titles, what, a WBC, IBF?
Yes.
So
I'm a 3-time world champion.
Okay.
I am a two division champion, WBC light welterweight champion, and IBF champion. Then I went up to welterweight, and I took another belt from another champion that had it, Randall Bailey. So that made me 3-time world champion.
let's talk about Don King. Don King, the biggest name in boxing history.
Yes.
You know, and he wants to be your promoter. And so you worked together for a little while. How did that come about? And give us a little snippet about Don King.
Yes. Oh man. So I was a decorating amateur. So I got wind that he was watching me in some of the tournaments I went to. He had scouts to come look and see me at some of the tournaments. And I actually did a news channel at Vashon High School. They came, followed me through the hallways, and Don King got wind of it, and he flew me to Florida, where his home was, talked to me and my coach Kevin, and he signed us. He signed it. And at that moment, I knew that God put me on this earth for a reason. At that moment, I knew I was on my way to a better life as opposed to what I was used to. So I just thank God that Don King saw something great in me, because he the one started my career.
Wow, that's amazing. And now your career, I guess it's coming to an end now.
Yes.
You could probably still box. I mean, Mike Tyson's still going back and boxing in his 50s and things, and Holyfield, these guys. So I guess if the money's right, you may come back someday, but right now you're doing something special in the community. And could you fill us in on what's going up on Chambers Road up in North St. Louis?
Yes, Todd. Ever since I was a kid, I was a poor kid. I was. Sometimes I didn't eat at nighttime. I would have a ritual. Sometime my mom, it would get 7 o'clock, right? You know, kids typically eat around 6 or 7 o'clock. And I would ask my mom, "We got some food in the house, Mom?" I knew if she's quiet, it's time for me to go to bed, because we didn't have any food in the house. So I used to pray to God. I used to pray to God that, God, if you give me out of this poor state I'm in, I will come back and help this community and help these kids become better individuals. And that's the type of mindset I'm in. That's the type of mindset I have right now, is to help my community, because I understand what these kids are going through. I understand exactly what they're thinking, what their thoughts are, because I was that kid. So I'm opening up a gym on Chambers Road called the Devon Alexander Foundation, and I want this foundation of mine and this gym space to be a safe haven for these kids that really need it, that need an outlet, that's hungry, that needs some food. Everything that I didn't have as a kid, I want to make sure I supply it to the kids. So I just got a heart for it, and I'm doing what I told God said I was going to do, which is come back and help these kids.
So if someone wants to get involved in the Devon Alexander Foundation as far as a corporate sponsor, a volunteer,
Absolutely.
or if you're a kid out there watching right now, this 3-time boxing world champion,
Indeed.
How can they get a hold of you and get involved with your program?
Absolutely. Well, they can get a hold of me on all social media platforms, Devon Alexander, and also my email is thechamp10056 yahoo.com. That is my non-for-profit email if you need information regarding that. Also, I will be doing a lot of giveaways, so keep looking out for that information on my website at www.devonalexanderfoundation.com. And just keep up with us. I hope you guys continue to be with me, because I want to change the narrative that St. Louis has some of the worst kids. I want to change, because we always on the murder list. We always got this stigma that we kill. But there are kids out there that's trying, that's want to do the right thing. So I want to highlight that under my foundation.
One more time, the website or number?
www.devonalexanderfoundation.com, and the number is 636-233-1789. And you guys can reach me on social media under Devon Alexander. I always answer, because without my fans, who is Devon Alexander? They won't talk about me. So
perfect. 3-time world champion.
Yes, indeed.
Devon Alexander, right here on Inside Sports. Thank you so much.
Yes, indeed.
We're going to take a quick break now, but stay with us, because Hall of Fame broadcaster Ron Jacober will join us when we return.
Is it okay to call you Mom?
Of course you can.
I, Krista, take you, Jamie, to be my wife.
When we found out that we were pregnant, we were just elated. We were just sitting there waiting for the pediatrician. She said she won't be taking you in as a client.
We are a lesbian couple, but she's just a baby. She's the one you're denying the service to.
Hey, welcome back to the show. Our next guest has covered sports longer than anyone in St. Louis outside of Jack Buck. He was a sports anchor at KSDK Channel 5 for 20 years and served as sports director at KMOX for over 20. Ron Jacober, welcome to Inside Sports.
Thank you. Nice to be in a television studio again for a change.
Yeah, it's been a while. I mean, over your Hall of Fame career, you spent many, many moons inside the TV studios, radio stations. As a kid growing up, I moved back from Long Island, New York with my family, and Channel 5 Sports, Jay Randolph and Ron Jacober, you guys were like the dynamic duo of sports broadcasters in St. Louis. And what I really remember most is, outside of your great reporting and interviews, was your outfits. You had those red pants and the play. It was like Bob Cuban era.
I saw a video come up a couple of years ago of a leisure suit that I wore. This god-awful green leisure suit with the huge collars, and my wife said, "You actually wore that on television?" I said, "Yeah, I did."
That was the style back in the day.
It was the style.
It was like the stand-the-man Bob Cuban look.
That's right.
You know, it really was. Now, Ron, you're from Illinois, so you're kind of a regional guy. Went to SIU Carbondale and started in your broadcasting career. And I assume you started out in television first, because you covered a lot of sports when I was growing up, and Channel 5 and sports back in the day, it was probably just as good as it is now.
Oh, I think so. In fact, I started in radio. Started KMOX. I was there the first time for a couple of years, and it's a long story that I won't bore you with, but I remember Jay Randolph had left, went to Channel 5, and I called Jay one day and said, "There's so much great talent here at KMOX. I'm not getting anywhere. If you hear everything, let me know." He said, "Oh my goodness, we're ready to hire another guy here at Channel 5. When can you come over for an audition?" I said, "You tell me." He said, "How about 10:30 tonight?" So I went over after the 10 o'clock news. I did a sportscast, and they hired me the next day. It was a phenomenal, accidental career. I tell young people all the time.
Now, you've broadcasted so many sports. I mean, you've done, local, regional, national, and international with the Olympics. You have a couple fond memories that really stand out from earlier in your career.
Well, I liked the ability to be versatile, and I thought I was fairly good at most of them. I wasn't great at all of them, but I did Cardinals, I did the Blues for years on KMOX. I did hundreds of soccer games. I did basketball on ESPN with Oscar Robertson, and then and I did the Olympics for CBS. That was the crown jewel for me, the ability. I was in Sydney for almost a month for those games, and just to be in that environment was just incredibly exciting and rewarding. Never worked harder in my life than I did that month there, but it was really rewarding.
Back then, there was only like 5 channels. It was like 2, 4, 5, 11, 9, and maybe 30. If you
now there's a million channels.
Like, there's so many of them. So I'm thinking back in the day when there was an Olympic game, when there was a Cardinal game, there was a Blues game, there was like 5 channels. And so it was easy to get those. They were on regular free TV.
Yeah.
And everybody remembers all the great moments because ABC's Wild World of Sports. Everything that happened on then, you remember. But now it's so watered down that I think that some of the crowning moments in sports, not everybody gets to see them because there's just so much to.
Well, let me tell you,
there.
back in those days at Channel 5, we did 30 Cardinal games a year. That's all, 30 games. Most of them were on weekends because we were an NBC affiliate. NBC wouldn't let us do them during the week. But 30 games is all. Now every Cardinal game is televised. Back then it was a special to have a Cardinal game on television. And Jay and I did those with Jack Buck. But that's how things have changed.
Maybe that's why KMOX is so revered and popular, because with only 30, 40 games being broadcast nationally, you had every game on KMOX going all the way out to the West Coast.
No question. We could get into 40, 42 states on a good night on KMOX. When I used to do post-game talk shows, I'd hear from people all over the country. Wouldn't get over the Rocky Mountains. That's the only place it wouldn't get over. But yeah, I used to get a lot of calls from Canada and hockey fans, and it was an amazing experience to work there.
Well, before the Colorado Rockies came, Denver anointed St. Louis Cardinals as their team.
Exactly.
How about that? Recently, Pete Rose passed away.
He died yesterday. It was announced that he died. He had signed autographs 2 days before in Nashville, went back to Las Vegas and died. And I found an interview I did with Pete Rose, I think when I was a young brat, 1969 or 1970, at Channel 5. Channel 5 uploaded on YouTube, and I found it last night, and it was an amazingly good interview. I was really pleased to find it, and he was really a good interview in those days.
Well, he was a kid a guy I patterned myself after growing up. Charlie Hustle. We ran to the ball, we ran to the bases, we would dive. We had an attitude and an edge because watching Pete Rose.
Right. He had more hits than anybody in the history of the game, but unfortunately he also gambled on the games. Not when he was playing, but when he was managing. At least that's what he said. He denied it for years. And because of the denial, the baseball commissioner suspended him for life. He is not in the Baseball Hall of Fame. Whether he will be after his death, I don't know. It would be a shame to do it then, I think. But he should be there. But I understand the reason he's not is because he gambled. I used to go spring training in St. Petersburg. I see him at the dog track down there. Now, there was nothing wrong with that. It's not illegal to bet on the dogs in St. Petersburg or Tampa, but he loved to gamble.
I guess it was the games he didn't bet on, which is kind of like a red. Pete's not too confident about this game today.
Well, he claimed he never bet on his own team. Whether he did or not, who knows?
Well, Ron, you've got so many great memories. You've written several books. You've got a new one out right now. The second edition of Immortal Moments in Cardinals History. I guess it's kind of hard just to have one edition.
Well,
with
there's so much.
Edition.
Yeah, it's about 100 immortal moments in the Cardinal history. And it reads kind of like a Reader's Digest version of Cardinal history. It's not a continuous story. You can read a few, put it down, come back to it. And it goes all the way back into the late 1800s up until, well, there were no immortal moments this season. I got to tell you, there were no moments this season worthy of the book. But people love this stuff. And even though the Cardinals had a terrible year, I'm sure this book will sell very well. It's in all the bookstores. It'll be Barnes & Noble pretty soon, on Amazon. Wherever you get good books, you can find it. It's done by Reedy Press, which is a local company. They do a terrific job. Every immortal moment in there has a photo or photos with it. That's what makes this book so wonderful. They do a great job with pictures.
What I liked about it was going back to the 1800s, and you realize, the Browns, I don't know if they changed names, the Browns and the Cardinals.
They did, yes.
Things, but the Browns were, like, originally our team.
No question. Yeah. And they eventually morphed into the Cardinals. But of course, there was that fascinating year when the Cardinals and the Browns were in the World Series. The only time that happened, they called it the Streetcar World Series in St. Louis at Sportsman's Park. And of course, that's in the book too. The Cardinals won that series, but the Browns gave them a lot of game. And the Browns were pretty good, but it was the war years. So the quality of play probably was pretty questionable then, because the Browns used Pete Gray, an outfielder with one arm for a while. I mean, so it couldn't have been great baseball, I guess. But anyway, they did play a World Series against each other.
I guess it was entertaining. So the Cardinals, they didn't really rise to prominence until, what, the 1920s?
Well, yeah, the 1920s, and then the Gas House Gang came along with Dizzy Dean and those players like that. And then the Musial era started in the early 40s, Musial and Shaneys, and Stan turned out to be a pretty good friend. The start of his career was just phenomenal. They called him up in late September, and he played about 8 games and just tore it up. And I think it was Casey Stengel said, nobody could be that good. Well, we say in the book, yes, he was. Yes, he was.
Yeah, you mentioned the teams in the 1940s, and then there was a little bit of a lull, I guess. And then in the 1960s, I guess after Bing Devine traded for Lou Brock and got fired, things really turned around and the Cardinals went crazy.
Well, that was one of the great seasons in Cardinal history because of how it happened. Because Devine traded for Lou Brock. Then Gussie Boyce was frustrated because they hadn't been winning. So he fired the general manager, Bing Devine. He wanted to fire Johnny Keane, the manager, but they was talked out of it until at the end of the season. Well, they came back and won it all. The Phillies and the Milwaukee, not Phillies, Phillies and Cincinnati Reds collapsed down the stretch. And the Cardinals came back and won it on the last day against the lowly New York Mets. Gibson came back and pitched on like 2 days rest. And I got to know Bob pretty well. I did post-game programs with him on KMOX, and I've got to tell you, the conversations we had off the air were much better and much more interesting than on the air. Because he told me hair-raising stories about growing up as a black kid in Omaha and then trying to drive from Omaha to St. Petersburg, Florida, for spring training. He said, we could stop and get gas, but no one would let us use restrooms. And we had to look for the black part of those towns in order to get a meal. I mean, it was hair-raising stories. And Lou Brock told me much of the same kind of story about growing up in that era.
It's sad that, it had to be like that, but, that was a very transitional time then. And that's, the time he started working here in St. Louis, and he had 3 World Series in the 1960s. I mean, he had the Boston one and he had the Detroit one.
Well, Enos Slaughter, who was in the Hall of Fame as a Cardinal and Yankee outfielder, but Enos was a redneck from North Carolina and a racist. And when Jackie Robinson came into the league, Slaughter said, "We're not playing him. We won't play him." And Musial stood up and said, "We will play them, and you will show up and play the game of baseball." Slaughter spiked Robinson because he was playing first base, cut his foot because he stepped on him on purpose. And but Musial was really a motivator in terms of the racial problem, in terms of understanding the black players. And I've got a great picture at home of Stan congratulating Jackie Robinson crossing the plate when Robinson hit a home run in an All-Star game. And it's one of my treasures.
You've got a lot of chapters in here. You want to tease on a couple of them? Maybe some stories that, are maybe a little more obscure.
How about 6 years ago, Matt Carpenter. Matt Carpenter hit 3 home runs and 2 doubles in a game at Wrigley Field. Now, you talk about an all-time game for a player like Matt Carpenter, who was a good Cardinal and probably has played his last game as a Cardinal and maybe as a major leaguer. But that's one of the kinds you don't remember that kind of thing that's in there. A lot of stuff on Gibson, a lot of stuff on Musial, but how about catcher stealing home, for example?
Glenn Brummer.
Things like that are really good stories, but maybe a little obscure.
Mark Whitten.
Well, that's right. It's those are the fun things to research and write about.
There's a Fernando Tatis hit 2 grand slams in 1 inning in a game
against a pitcher named Chan Ho Park, and you wonder why Chan Ho Park was still in the game when he hit the 2nd grand slam in the 1st inning.
Yeah, that's amazing. And now you see Fernando Tatis Jr.,
Yeah.
his son, really tearing it up
He's
right
a good.
now.
He's a great player. Probably better than his dad. But they hit 2 grand slams on 1 inning in Dodger Stadium. that can't happen, but it did.
So what are your thoughts moving forward with the way the TV contracts are going now? Because you don't know what's going to happen. The Cardinals just had a little bit of a shake-up in their front office. I mean, you've got 2 perennial All-Stars, Nolan Arenado and Paul Goldschmidt, and things were really looking bright in St. Louis. And what do you think, in your opinion, after covering the team for all these years, why do you think that there wasn't maybe the cohesiveness, or with some stalwart players like that and some pretty decent pitching this year? What's happened to the Cardinals?
The bullpen was really good. The bullpen was really good. My personal opinion was it goes down to the manager. Whitey Herzog and Tony La Russa in this environment would have been better. Now, I'm not that close to it. I'm not trying to rip on Oli Marmol, but a manager has to motivate. A manager can make the difference with 10 or 12 or maybe 15 games a year, that's all. But if he has that ability, then that's why those guys, that's why Whitey was so good and why Tony was so good. Totally different managers, totally different philosophies, but both great managers.
And they were both veteran managers when Whitey and Tony came here, because a lot of people think that if Bruce Bochy or Terry Francona or somebody like that, if they just would have kept Mike Shildt, then things might have been a little bit different. Would a veteran manager been better?
I firmly feel so. I totally agree with you. I think it would be. A manager has to motivate, okay? These guys are making so much money that if you can't motivate them, they're not going to win. And you think, well, because they're making so much, they should be motivated themselves. Well, they're human beings. Tony had a great expression. They're men, not machines. And you have to be able to motivate this day and age, I think, maybe in every age, to be a good manager.
Well, Ron, you've got some book signings coming up before we let you go. Immortal Moments in Cardinals History, the 2nd edition. And do you know off the top of the head? We're going to put a graphic up here on your book signings coming up later this year. There's one in late October and one in December.
I've got 2 next week. One with Kevin Wheeler at KMOX and one with Frank Cusimano at KTRS.
Okay, and book signings coming up?
Yeah, we got book signings at Barnes & Noble, several of them, I think. I don't have it with me. But between now and the end of the year, a great Christmas present, by the way, for a Cardinal fan and your family.
Thank you so much, Ron, for joining us.
Thanks for the invite.
We really appreciate it. That's our show for you today. We'd especially like to thank our studio guests, and we would like to thank you for watching Inside Sports on STL TV. Experience St. Louis.